want war. Crime babies looking for food, starvation, the recipe, people subdued. When the people you trust got it in for you. Deceit is the word of the day and every clue. Don't let it go, it's from the days of old. Time is up, but some still do not know. Can I make up my mind? Is it worth the dime? Do I have to take a minute just to make it mine? Life's never fair, but don't listen to the TV. Go out and take a listen to the streets with the people in the slums and the homeless bums with degrees and degrees sitting under a tree. It's not easy in the world for the poor man, the one that brought you to reality. See, they don't want you to know about the black sheep, leaving 7 rows to the 12 families all around the globe with an ancient code. Is it really asking a lot to say a death old? Cause we sitting on the earth looking back at extinct, and I'm standing on some ground that's about to sink. I ain't scared for a minute, I ain't about to blink, but I documented for the world what I see and think. Feel we on the call and I feel we on the break. All Congress gonna do is waste paper and ink. Vote or die, you voted and you'll die. You can have it both ways, can't say it's a lie. You can march all you want, but they playing you wrong. They only understand war, it's the same old song. They want war, all they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more, but they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war. All they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more, but they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war. Like a lotus coming out of the mud with colors, I create envy in those with power but jealous. I unify the poor with my song, the hell with the others. Descended the way they treat indigenous brothers, cause I understand we link forever. They try to hate us even though that we keep it together. I'm not talking about controlling the air or the weather, I'm talking about maintaining the truth, the high endeavor. A rebel drops bombs in the midst of trouble. The free world counterattack and now there's double, but nature gets the shit in the way to settle. If you stop the machines for a minute you might hear, but they won't cause the TV's whisper in the ear. And capitalism has eyes that don't dare, and they cloud up and get crazy and won't stare. And like an ad, it's hard to get an ass to listen. Living like this is like living in prison. It's hard to keep hope when you're living in prison. The spiritual thoughts, so yes, the mental prison. The outside, yes, it's got to get through. Something's gotta die, so something here can live. Your life is nothing if you got nothing to give. Keeping the spiritual, yes, disguised as religion. Controlling your mind, the mental prison. They want war, all they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more, but they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war. All they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more, but they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war.
Alrighty. Yo, I'm back at it again. I'm on the OBS now, so I'm on the desktop, and I can do a few other things live, which is actually where I started when I was doing live streaming. When I started doing live streaming a year ago, I started with this platform, essentially this method, using OBS and maybe some other streaming platforms that allow me to pull up stuff in real time a little bit easier. But I changed for a few different reasons, good reasons, by the way, but from time to time, it's good to go back to the other method because, you can respond to listeners much faster. A lot of times people in the chat have some relevant points or some completely ridiculous points that you might want to cover in real time. So today, for this hour, I'm going to use this method, and I hope that the messages go out in the algorithm and enough people get a chance to see the broadcast. Sometimes that changes depending on the algorithm, depending on the system I'm using, and depending on the format, so generally I think I got it right. It might take a little bit longer for people to come in, but we got an hour, so let's go. Now, one of my listeners, I can't recall the name, but if you do come to see the video, make sure you leave a thumbs up after the video or during the video. Let me be aware of who that was. But they brought up the idea that I should cover the brown shirts and the black shirts of the Nazi period, right? And I thought, yeah, of course, that's on point, because that's exactly what we can compare. This is basically, it looks like The Trump administration took one out of their uh, resource book, out of their tool book, and attempted to implement a similar type of thing. And that's why people don't need to be so reactionary as much as they are understandeth and learneth in these types of approaches, these political things that have played out in history. I mean, often we get into our emotions, even myself, because when you're seeing horrible things be done, of course, it's easy to react if you're a normal person. But if you understand the wickedness and deception, unfortunately, that has been unleashed on the American population, if you understand the thinking behind these cruel, cruel people, you will see that they're actually running a systematic, attack. So you can't always react with your emotions. You need to plan, be aware, plan in advance, dissect and understand exactly what it is that you're up against before you fight back. Right. And on that note, I want to give everybody who's organizing in the streets, I want to give you a lot of credit. You deserve your flowers right now while you are alive, because you are doing exactly what needs to be done. And you're doing it in a peaceful manner. Of course, you're up against tyranny. You're up against totalitarianism. You're up against the stick, the rubber bullet, the baton, and that's backed by administration that speaks words of hate, words of disrespect, words that let you know they do not value the American citizens. I mean, think of how they talked about the poor, like they're not American citizens. I mean, since when have American citizens not been poor? Since when? Since when was that? American citizens, a lot of them when you could be, a lot of them just started out as poor from all backgrounds. Everybody wasn't an aristocrat. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wasn't lucky. Everyone wasn't appointed by the British, crown. So, you best to know your roots. You best to know your roots. And, but the way they talk about the poor, just like clean them up. They talk about the United States of America in general like they have a fantasy story about the United States of America. Like it was just one pretty little show, which is it's an insult to Americans. It's an insult to Americans. So in any case, I thought it was useful to go over the brown shirts and the black shirts, because you people out there, the military, you need to think about this. You need to know this history. And you poor broke asses that like to run around with the Proud Boys or do these little, paramilitary groups, acting paramilitary fake groups, or even real groups, marching around with your little Nazi flag. You all need to think about this, because you all also have a history. So let's review it. But in any case, let me let this run real quick. Let me see here. Can I do it like this? If I do it like this, can we? No. Okay, I see. I need to go down here. So let me see. Let me go down here, and then we can review this real quick. Boom. Let me know if you can hear this too.
Here's a tight comparative study of interwar fascist paramilitaries, Germany's brown shirts SA, Italy's black shirts, and dynamics around Donald Trump's rise and presidency, specifically the Proud Boys and his 2025 domestic deployments of the National Guard and, in Los Angeles, U.S. Marines. Number 1. Historical benchmarks, Germany's SA, brown shirts. The SA functioned as the Nazi Party's mass paramilitary, street-fighting intimidation and election season terror against leftists, Jews and other opponents. After Hitler took power in January 1933, SA violence continued and helped consolidate one-party rule, until the regime pruned the SA's autonomy during the 1934 Night of the Long Knives. Holocaust Encyclopedia, Italy's black shirts, squadristi. Fascist squads organized punitive expeditions against socialists and unions, often with collusion or tolerance from parts of the state, facilitating Mussolini's march to and consolidation of power. Scholarship stresses the centrality of organized violence and elite complicity to regime building. Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Defining features to carry forward for comparison. Party-aligned paramilitaries used systematic violence to influence politics. Tolerance or support from state actors normalized that violence. After power was won, security forces were reconfigured to keep coercion under centralized executive control. Number 2. Contemporary US actors and events, Proud Boys. A far-right group that played a prominent role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol. Federal juries convicted leaders of seditious conspiracy. Former National Chairman Enrique Tarrio received a 22-year sentence, the longest in any January 6 case. The group also publicly embraced Trump's 2020 debate message, "Stand back and stand by," as a rallying cue. Justice Ministerium 2025 Federal Deployments, Guard and Marines. June 2025, reporting indicates Trump deployed California National Guard and active duty U.S. Marines during protests tied to immigration raids, sparking legal challenges about the Posse Comitatus Act. Reuters, Washington, D.C. August 2025, National Guard units were authorized to carry firearms while patrolling as part of a broader federal crime emergency posture. Reuters. Planned expansions. The administration and Pentagon have discussed outlined deployments to Chicago and possibly other Democratic-led cities. The Washington Post, legal frame. The Posse Comitatus Act generally bars using the Army Air Force and, by statute, the Navy Marine Corps for domestic law enforcement except when Congress authorizes it, e.g., Insurrection Act. Analyses highlight loopholes, grey areas, e.g., support versus law enforcement, and contested theories of presidential protective power. Brennan Center for Justice 3. Parallels where the patterns rhyme. 1. Extra-party violence as political leverage. Then, SA black shirts used organized street violence to intimidate rivals and shape political outcomes. Holocaust Encyclopedia. Now, the Proud Boys leadership was convicted for a conspiracy to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power. The group valorized signals from a major party leader. This shows how non-state militants can be mobilized symbolically and practically around executive power struggles. Justice Ministerium 2. Normalization via elite state tolerance. Then Italian and German elites tolerated or partnered with paramilitaries, letting violence police politics. Economics.at.edu. Now, while US courts have punished January 6 leadership, political rhetoric from the top, stand by, and subsequent attempts to deploy federal forces into domestic political arenas risk legitimizing coercive methods as policy tools. AP News 3. Fusion of party aims with security power. Then paramilitaries help the regime seize and then remake the state's coercive apparatus. Holocaust Encyclopedia. Now the 2025 use of Guard, and in LA, Marines for urban law and order, and immigration protest control echoes attempts to align federal force with partisan policy goals, testing legal boundaries much as interwar regimes blurred militia state lines. Reuters number 4. Critical differences. Why the analogy isn't 1-1. Institutional constraints. US federalism, independent courts, oppositional state, local officials, and robust civil society have so far imposed real checks, e.g., felony convictions of Proud Boys leaders, public legal resistance to deployments. There was no equivalent independent judiciary blocking fascist consolidation in 1922-34. Justice Ministerium, no single-party militia merged into the state. The Proud Boys are not a formal party arm and have faced significant prosecution, unlike the SA black shirts during their pivotal years. Justice Ministerium, legal guardrails, contested but extant. Posse Comitatus and the Insurrection Act framework create hurdles and litigation avenues absent in interwar dictatorships. Brennan Center for Justice, scale and intent. Interwar violence was sustained, mass and explicitly regime building. US episodes are serious but intermittent, and political competition continues. Elections, turnover, investigative. Number 5. Risk indicators to watch, drawn from the historical pattern. Expanded use of federal forces for domestic politics, e.g. broader armed patrols, routine deployments to opposition-led cities, or novel interpretations of protective executive power. The Washington Post. Impunity or political shielding for allied militants, rolling back January 6 accountability, or overt reintegration of extremist networks. Justice Ministerium. Administrative rewiring, durable quick reaction, domestic forces built around national political aims, rather than neutral public safety. The Washington Post, MOV6, bottom line. The cleanest analogy isn't America has SA black shirts now, but rather some dynamics rhyme, politically aligned militants testing democratic red lines, and a leadership willing to leverage, or be seen to leverage, coercive power to pursue partisan ends. The biggest break on a full interwar replay is that the US still has functioning counter-vetoes, federalism, courts, media, civil society, and active legal constraints, even if contested, all of which didn't constrain fascist consolidation in Italy, Germany. If you want, I can turn this into a printable brief with a side-by-side table, SA Black Shirts, Proud Boys, Federal Forces, a legal authority flowchart, Posse Comitatus versus Insurrection Act, and a one-page risk dashboard you can reuse on air.
Okay. So these are some of the resources. Now let me see. I could see you guys can't actually see the resources here. So let me just pull my little screen up a little bit so you can see some of them. Here we go. So let's go back here. Okay. Now, for those of you that are interested in sources, here are some sources for you. Right? The Holocaust Encyclopedia. A lot of MAGA people don't even believe the Holocaust was real. Like, seriously, straight up. A lot of the Proud Boys don't. Donald Trump even praised, some of the thing in some way, Nazis, a few of them, right? And there's constantly people within that administration or within that support base, MAGA, that either praise ex-Nazi members or people that were in the Nazi party, and also just rhetoric, symbolism in general, right? This constant thing about the Jews. This other, dynamic where it's always about heritage, the quote unquote heritage, even though it's pretty much offensive to white people, to people, quote unquote, that are casting that thing, white people. If you go around and you look at the definition and how MAGA uses it, they don't acknowledge that it just pointing people out that way is discriminatory also. Like, you're not all the same people. All Europeans used to fight each other over ethnicity. You see? I'm in Denmark, so I know a lot about Danish history, right? Danes conquered a lot of Europe. Of course, they had wars against other groups, fought back, other ethnicities, other European ethnic groups fought back. And Denmark is what it is today because of that fighting back, and negotiating and a lot of things. But, but when you go to, in Europe, people understand this and acknowledge this, right? Hence, they keep their languages alive, their culture, distinct cultures alive, right? They don't group everybody up like that. I mean, the right wing tends to do that, but then they always fail because, when you go back and you examine the history lesson they try to put out there, you see all the faults in it. But in the U.S., you don't typically do this. They typically group, each other together, even though in early Americas, in the United States, in the colonial period, they were not one group. They did not necessarily like each other. And as the country progressed, ethnic rivalry existed. You see what I mean? I mean, you could just go back and examine the history yourself. But in any case, these are some of the references. Cambridge University, 10 for line, right? Economics, education, right? MIT, Oxford, the Justice Ministerium. This is something from Denmark, actually, ironically enough. But again, Europeans do a lot more. I would say they, on a general level, in terms of the conversations that they have in the societies, they actually do a lot to point out these things in their educational system. And of course, education is free in Denmark. Universal education is free. You actually get paid to educate yourself. So they take education about these things serious, and you can see it in how the population reacts to certain things, AP News. You know, AP News is one that got kicked out. Donald Trump kicked them out in the beginning just for asking a normal journalistic question. Now they're back in and they get to cover him, you know. So they covered the Proud Boys, right? Enrique Tarrio. I think he got a pardon even by Trump, you know, if I'm not right. Correct me. Did Enrique get a pardon? Even the Nazis didn't worry around with that. I mean, actually, the Nazis just killed, you know, Hitler. If you know, we're going to go into this next segment. Hitler ordered, after seeing the brown jackets, or the brown shirts, I'm sorry, as being kind of dumb and kind of they became a liability to Hitler. He ordered the military complex, that would be the National Guard, that would be the Marines, the military, to execute them. Like, and in this case, that would be the Proud Boys. You see what I mean? And these other ones, you know, because obviously you can't pretend, you can't get things done when you have just lunatics, you know, that aren't willing to, you know, they wanted power themselves, you know, and Hitler was like, nope, I'm the only one that's going to have power. You don't negotiate with me. End of story. And that's pretty much, you know, the history of it. You got the Guardian. I mean, a lot of right wingers read the Guardian when there's articles they tend to like the articles about, you know, that make immigrants look bad. They read those articles. So here's one for you. Reuters, right? There's one. Washington Post, right? Washington Post. I mean, they don't like that because, you know, they don't like Washington Post. But now it's owned by the same guy that owns Amazon. So you're free to watch it. You know, he's a supporter of Trump. So you're free to watch it if you're a MAGA supporter. You're free to read it, you know. Okay. PBS, MAGA people hate public. You know, they don't understand the relationship between public TV or public news, which is not centered around political parties. You know, it's just centered around your actual population, what it really looks like. You know, if you have a country with African Americans in it or Caribbean people in it, it's okay to talk about them in a positive way if they exist in a positive way. If you have people from Irish background, Irish descent, English descent, it's okay to talk about them in a positive way, like, you know, show how they work together in everyday life. It's okay to do that. But MAGA people, we know this one was on the chopping block because there has to be division for this game to work. Someone has to be the fall guy. A certain population must be the fall guy for this to work. Of course, we know Hitler was just after the money. You know, him and his oligarchy, they were after the money, and they got everybody else to try to chase all the Jews around and minorities. And that was the cover up, you know. So they kept all them distracted while secretly they just wanted the gold, you know. The Brennan Center for Justice. Okay, you can go there. Here's another one. Steve Ledek, right? You can go here. AP News. Okay. India Times. Okay. Al Jazeera. Military.com. I don't know if any of you go to military.com and read. Militarytimes.com. That's another one. Substack.com. Right. Okay. Lawfare Media, right? Worldhistory.org. Yeah, there you go. So these are some of the references from which ChatGPT pulled information from, right? Here's one from YouTube. Donald Trump's comment, stand back and stand by. I mean, I'm sure everyone remembers stand back and stand by. I'm sure MAGA people remember it because they stood back and stood by. They were ready. They support Jan 6. They liked that the police had to defend the Capitol from people that were chanting they wanted to kill Mike Pence and chanting that they wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi. They supported that. They supported the hangman rope. They supported that whole effort. You know, they don't see that as violent. They were actually against the police and against the police that shot a woman for trying to enter the inner chamber, not the outer hallways and all of that stuff. No, the inner chamber where people were hiding because their lives were being threatened. People were in fear, including Mike Pence, who's a Republican, by the way, who was the vice president. You know, they don't consider that violent, the MAGA folk. and Trump doesn't either, right? So those are some of the resources in case you want to check that out. Now, I'm going to ask a question into ChatGPT and see what comes of it. Let me see here. First question: what happened to the brown shirts? Let's see here. See if we can get that up on the screen. Let me see here. Boop, boop, boop. Oh, okay. A lot happened. Here we go. Okay, let's take a listen.
The brown shirts, formerly the Sturmabteilung or SA, were crucial to Hitler's rise, but they did not survive long as an independent force once the Nazis consolidated power. Here's the trajectory. One role before 1933, founded in the early 1920s as the Nazi Party's paramilitary street army, wore brown uniforms, hence brown shirts, and specialized in violent confrontations, breaking up rival meetings, intimidating voters, and fighting communists and socialists in the streets. Helped give the Nazis an image of strength and discipline. 2. After Hitler became Chancellor, January 1933, the SA grew rapidly. By mid-1930s, over 2 million members, dwarfing the German army, Reichswehr, which was capped at 100,000 under the Treaty of Versailles. SA leader Ernst Röhm envisioned the SA becoming the core of a new People's Army, replacing or absorbing the Reichswehr. 3. Conflict with elites and the army. The conservative elites, businessmen, aristocrats, and especially the Reichswehr generals saw the SA's ambitions as a threat. Röhm's radical ideas also clashed with Hitler's need to reassure the army and industrialists that Nazi rule would not destabilize their position. 4. The Night of the Long Knives, June 30th, July 2nd, 1934. Hitler struck against the SA leadership in a purge known as the Night of the Long Knives. Röhm and dozens of top SA leaders were executed. Others were imprisoned or forced out. This was partly to secure the army's loyalty before Hitler merged the offices of President and Chancellor after Hindenburg's death in August 1934. F5 Aftermath. The SA was not abolished, but it was politically neutered. Its functions were reduced to training and minor ceremonial duties. The SS, Schutzstaffel, originally a smaller security unit within the SA, gained independence under Heinrich Himmler and became the dominant paramilitary terror apparatus of the Nazi state. The SA continued to exist during the Third Reich, but never regained political power. It became largely irrelevant. In short, the brown shirts were essential in Hitler's rise, but became a liability once he had power. They were violently sidelined in 1934, with the SS and the formal state security apparatus taking their place as the regime's enforcers. Do you want...
Okay, so let me go back to a couple of points here. Let's see, we go back here. Let's go to the top of this one. Where are we at? Are we here? Yeah, here we go. Okay, brown shirts, formerly the Sturmabteilung, or SA, were crucial to Hitler's rise, but they did not survive long as the independent force once the Nazis consolidated power. Here's the trajectory. Okay, so founded in 1920, and what's interesting is when they got abolished is not too long. Look, they came to be of service in 1930. Here it is. After Hitler became chancellor, they grew rapidly, but by the 1930s, over 2 million members, right? I think this time period from 1930 to 1933 is crucial. I don't believe they lasted 2 years. So let me see here. Let me see. How long did the brown shirts last before last? Okay. In terms of their okay, let's see here. Okay, here's their timeline, right? It says, and then we can go through the references also. Good question. Okay, lasted longer than maybe people think, but the real political activity was mostly concentrated in the years of 1921 to 1934. Okay, so that's like a 13-year period, right? Now, timeline of activity, 1921, 1923, right? From 1921 to 1933, there was the early formation under Hitler. Check 1, 2. Yeah, can y'all hear me? Is the audio loud enough here? Let me turn it up. Okay, early formation under Hitler, acted as bodyguards and street fighters for the Nazi Party. That's like hooligans, you could say, show up, and kind of like the Proud Boys. You know what I mean? They don't have any police. They don't have any role in the government, but they're hooligans and they claim to exercise their rights. But what they do is they bully other people into, not acting out on their rights as well. So after the failed beer hall push 1923, the SA was temporarily banned. Okay. Temporarily banned. Damn. That should have happened in the U.S. I don't know how much of that really happened. Some of their activities were rolled back. I guess you could say they were arrested under Biden, prosecuted, and things like this. So you could call that a rollback. But then Trump came and pardoned them. Okay, reorganized 1925, 1933, reorganized when the Nazi Party was refounded. Sounds like Trump coming back into office. This is a period of peak activity, constant street battles with communists and social democrats. Okay. And that's another interesting thing to look into, because a lot of Americans, they think communists and social democrats, of course, communism, I would think that the description here would be very similar, like Hitler was. They weren't up for that, and social democrats. But social democrats are not the same as Democrats in the U.S., in this case. But intimidation of voters and visible rallies that made the Nazi movement appear militant and powerful, right? After Hitler took power, 1933 and 1934. Now, this is crucial. After Hitler took power, the SA swelled over 2 million members. The activism increasingly alarmed the army. I mean, this is similar to what we saw in the U.S. when Trump took power the first time. These type of people that believed in these things that had already been disseminated years earlier, like this hatred for Jews, this idea that our race is being taken over, although race doesn't really exist. Color exists, but that's not the same as race, for instance, or heritage. For instance, you can look at somebody who looks like Trump, and you might actually find that they have some more recent African ancestry than you might think, because that's how DNA works, right? And the same thing for a black person. You might look at them, but you might find out, or any other person, any other person, any person whatsoever, right? Your color does not dictate your heritage, in other words, there could be a lot more to it. But you saw people out there marching on these ideas, getting, feeling bold, feeling like they got their opportunity in politics to insert themselves and to assert their beliefs, right? The activism increasingly alarmed the army, conservative elites. We saw that. We saw generals speak openly about these activities, calling them un-American, calling them and saying that Trump is anti-constitution. He's not, basically anti-American. This culminated in the night of the long knives, where most of the SA leadership was killed. Now we didn't see this part yet. Biden, he chose to prosecute. He chose, and you Proud Boys, you people, you brown shirts out there, you should be happy, because see, if you want to enact Hitler would have killed your ass. That's exactly what it really was. Hitler would have killed your ass. And you are actually pointing the finger at Biden like he was wrong. Well, maybe he should have. Maybe you would respect him a little more, but you don't. He saw you still as Americans enough to just use the law as it was. Nazi Germany, they didn't give a damn about the Constitution. They just wiped that out and executed you. They had, which is what you're trying to do, actually, to the very people that didn't execute you, that actually just used the law as it was. You're actually trying to exterminate them. Okay. 1934 to 1945. The SA continued to exist on paper until the end of World War II, but their role was ceremonial and secondary. Training programs, parades, and lower level. In other words, they didn't need you anymore. You see, the people with the money that wanted the money and didn't really care about ethnicity, like you got to remember, is what's Hitler's ethnicity? All right. Are we back? Now let me see if I can get this back up on the screen real quick. Is everybody there? You following me? Yeah, okay, we're here. So, yeah, where were we? As I was saying, those things are not, there's more data points than what simple-minded people think about, and MAGA folk are largely simple-minded. They come with simple ideas like, keep in mind, J.D. Vance had the nerve to come to Europe and preach about, what he thought was the enemy within. He's giving some, trying to speak with a forked tongue, In other words, he's trying to say that the enemy is restricting. On one hand, it sounds like he's talking about the enemy who restricted disinformation, like as if restricting disinformation, right? Putin's disinformation, the same disinformation that he was hitting with the U.S., the American version, that is a violation of freedom of speech, right? At the same time, you could look at that as a racial component or a ethnic component or these kind of things, So he uses the same forked tongue, which is what's going on in the U.S., because you don't know in the U.S. who is American. I'll give you an example. Fox host Sean Hannity. He's a second generation immigrant, but yet the way he talks, you would think that his ancestors had been in America since the beginning, since the Civil War, but that's not the case. Hence these data points, right? And hence simple-minded people, how they conscrewed things, and actually become, actually eat at each other. You see, and it's in a very sad way, but that's what ignorance does. But let's go back to this. So how long did they last? 1945, another 11 years, but irrelevant. Okay, so the 11 years was irrelevant after, right? They lasted some time, but a lot of that time was irrelevant. Look at this. As politically active, fear street militia. This is the key thing. 1921, 1934, about 13 years. But 11 years. This, you see this? Okay, so that's just another data point. But now let me see here. What's another aspect of it? Let's see here. Can Hitler's upper circle be compared to oligarchs in the USA? Can Hitler's upper circle or financiers, right, be compared? Let's see here. It's just some, it's just some random questions, Now, for me, I like to ask questions, but of course, if you are a MAGA head or a pro-Putin puppet douchebag, you would probably disagree with anything and everything that I say. But as you could see, for the reasonable people, you could see all I did was type it up. I don't know what the damn answer is going to be. Here's the answer. And we're going to look at the resources, okay? Because, by the way, Chat GDP uses resources. It doesn't just make it up on its own. It's using other public resources, all right? Yes, there are some clear parallels, but also important structural differences between Hitler's upper circle and financiers, industrial patrons, today U.S. oligarch class. Let's break it down. This doesn't have anything to do with you brown shirts, because you brown shirts are poor people. You won't get nothing out of this. You won't get a better life. You won't get health care. Your own families are suffering right now because of Trump's tax break. The biggest tax break to the rich in the United States history. And the biggest cutback on social services, which is paid for by your federal tax dollars that you pay into every hour that you go to any measly ass job, you broke asses. Yes, this is not about you. You have nothing to do with this part. So calm down. Hitler's financial backers in upper circle. Look, Fritz Thyssen, steel magnate. I wonder who that could be compared to. Was once one of Hitler's earliest major donors. I mean, we saw all these donors come out. We saw Trump. They all but bent the knee damn near. Now all but loads of them, and they still bending the knee. Hitler's earliest major donors. Because after this, I'm going to ask what happened to their ass. You know, did they have to pay any, Holocaust money? Of course, MAGA people don't believe the Holocaust really existed. Emil Kurdorf, coal baron. Damn, isn't that ironic? Trump always is preaching about coal. Coal. All right. E.G. Farben Krupp. I don't even know if I said that name right. Let's see here. Farben Krupp. I think it's like that. Kruppe. Maybe. Okay. These are German names, so I'm not totally used to pronouncing them, but so bear with me, anybody that's in Germany that knows this history, right? Okay. The other large firms later profited heavily under Nazi contracts. Well, does Trump have people profiting under his contracts right now? Yeah, they have an immigrant. What's his name? What's the guy who's behind the ICE thing, who's always out there, Steven something? He's getting paid from the prisons. You know, this dude's getting paid for the prison. So no wonder he likes the idea. But he also is an immigrant. He's not someone whose family is connected to the Civil War, the War of Independence. None of that. He came after this period. Ironically, he came and got tax dollars, got help from U.S. taxpayers like my family, like other Americans' families, to settle in the United States. And yet he's running the same scheme. I mean, that shows you the level of pure indecency. He has not even a decent bone in his body for MAGA folk. I mean, he's an imposter doing this. I mean, but hey, that's where MAGA folk allow in their stupidity. They're up for that kind of stuff. They're up for it. Okay. Motivations: fear of communism and labor unions. Okay. In the U.S., it's fear of free education, and not free education, universal education, which means everyone has access to it regardless of your status, your class status, and healthcare, regardless of your class status. This is what the comparison would be. Fear of communism and labor unions. Trump is anti-labor union. A lot of these industry people, not all of them, but many, are anti-unions. Why? Because they're more able to hoard the wealth and keep it from you broke ass MAGA people. But you're too stupid to understand that. Maybe you don't read on this stuff. I mean, education is not, there's not universal education in the U.S. So how would you know? How would you know? You would have to take this up yourself. This would have to be purely your own initiative, which could be dangerous if you don't have a little help, because the U.S., the internet is full of Russian propaganda. And I'm about to show you how deep it goes. Their money didn't single-handedly create Hitler, but it gave legitimacy. Sounds similar to Trump. And crucial resources, especially during election campaigns. 1930. Yes, this is sounding very interesting. Elon Musk, Heil Hitler from Elon Musk. Elon Musk says Heil Hitler to everybody out there. In case you MAGAs need a hello. Good morning, hello. I'm sure that's what you say when you wake up in the morning and brush your crooked ass rusty teeth. Once Hitler was in power, they benefited if you have teeth. Because you don't have health care. And if you don't have health care, a lot of you damn sure ain't seen a dentist in a while. Once Hitler was in power, they benefited. How much does a dentist cost in the U.S., by the way? Can you afford it? Put a 1 in the chat. I mean, I'm not saying you don't go anyway, because a lot of people do stuff they can't afford. But is it affordable in the U.S.? If visiting a dentist office in the U.S. is affordable, put a 1 in the chat. If it's not, put a 2 in the chat. Once Hitler was in power, they benefited enormously from state spending, suppression of unions, and war mobilization. Trump is definitely not an anti-war president. He's not an anti-war president. He's headed down to Venezuela right now. Of course, he's not headed to Russia. He's not headed, because obviously Putin has his own set of compromising, could be videos, could be photographs of Trump with doing some things with young people, right? Or it could be he got done in by some generals, with the old, train run on him. You don't know. You don't know, but he acts like it. He acts like it, it's unexplainable. His behavior is the first American president that will hold up a picture of the U.S. enemy, sworn enemy, hold it up and say he's a good man after he bombed an American factory. What else is there? What else is there? The man's strange. And if he didn't, then if he's not doing this because there's compromising information, then he's just weaker than even that. I could understand it I could understand it a little bit more if he's doing it because of compromising information. But if he's just doing it just because, damn, wow. Okay. 2, American oligarchs today. Wealth concentration. In the U.S., a small number of billionaires dominate finance, tech, energy, and media. MAGA people don't like that because it may have turned out that, Anyway, let's read some more. Political role. They fund campaigns, PACs, and lobbying in oil, real estate, and tech. Back populist and nationalist figures, while others back liberal, globalist agendas. You see? Are you MAGA people in agreement with that part? Because they mentioned some liberals. Do you agree or do you disagree? Put a 1 in the chat, MAGA people, if you agree with that. Put a 2 in the chat if you disagree, because, we're using Chat GDP here, so you never know. Chat GDP may be a hoax, Let's see here. Citizens United 2010 supercharged their influence by removing limits on corporate political spending. Sounds very right wing. Sounds very right wing to me. I'm sure Trump loved that. Didn't the Republicans love it? How many Republicans do you think voted for that? How many Democrats do you think voted against it? We can Chat GDP it and find out. Motivations. Protecting favorable tax policies. That's Trump. Deregulation of finance, energy, and tech. That's Trump. Ideological projects. Fossil fuel interests. Interest-resistant climate policy, that's Trump. Silicon Valley billionaires funding libertarian or authoritarian experiments. Yep, that's what's there today. Similarities. Elite sponsorship of authoritarian tendencies. In both cases, wealthy elites saw advantages in backing a leader who promised order, protection of capital, and suppression of left-wing opposition. Union folk. People that think the U.S. is rich enough and American citizens pay enough federal taxes to get universal education, to get universal health care with it. But MAGA folk, they just like paying taxes with nothing. These people don't even get disaster relief, but they still paying their taxes, because if you don't pay your taxes, the truth about you MAGA people is you're just as much as slaves as anybody else. If you don't pay those taxes, you're going to get the whip. Whoosh. Yes, you will. You will get the whip. And if you don't believe so, be so brave as to try it and see what happens. Mutual exchanges. Elites provide money legitimacy and networks. Very, very interesting. Money legitimacy and networks. The leader provides favorable policies, tax breaks, deregulation, contracts, suppression of labor movements. Dependency loop. Hitler needed industrial money to scale up the Nazi machine. Trump and similar figures need billionaires and their media outlets to maintain campaign viability and political reach. You see the similarities? Unless this is all a hoax. Key differences. Let's see if the MAGA people agree with the differences. I don't think they will, because many of them can't read anyway, you know. And if you're some person in some other country being farmed by Hitler, you probably don't even understand English really that well anyway. So not to the level I do anyway. So you might not even be able to understand. It's just no, left Trump 2024. Okay, got it. Political systems. Nazi Germany was a one-party dictatorship. Yeah, that's very similar to Trump. Yes, Nazi Germany was a one-party dictatorship. Industrialists had no alternative power centers once Hitler consolidated power. Yes, you see, you billionaires, you are also fucked. Because if Trump was ever to just fabricate any type of thing against you like he has the tendency of doing, you have no one to protect you. Because you didn't stand up for the Constitution, which protects everyone against these tendencies. You actually were dumb enough to try to make a pretty little penny. And you got fucked. And you will get the rest of it. Oh, my goodness. Okay. The U.S. billionaires are split across parties and still operate within pluralist institutions. They hedge bets, funding both sides rather than uniting behind one authoritarian project. So now this is a little interesting because he's saying that the U.S. is a little more liberal than Nazi Germany at that time. You know, they're trying to hedge bets. But listen, folks, no matter who you are, you have to understand hedging bets is not taking the side of right. It's not taking the side of the Constitution. It's not taking the side of the civilian population. You have now become partially, at least, anti. You have shown that you are willing to support anti-American tendencies if it means you'll get a buck. That's not good for your future. People are tired of that. Americans work 1 hour more than most other people in Western countries every day and take home less of their money in their pocket after they pay all their essentials: taxes, housing, healthcare, electricity, transportation, clothing, food, phone, blah, blah, blah. Yes, they take home much less than everyone else in the Western world after all those necessities are paid. So you indeed are more anti-American than industrialists are in Europe are anti-Europe. In fact, they tend to be pro-Europe industrialists and pro-European citizen. Enough to make sure that everybody has adequate things, the essentials taken care of, or at least they're within an affordable grasp on all levels, all sectors of society. Okay, let's see here. Right. Autonomy of capital. U.S. oligarchs are more independent and diversified globally. Although Trump just got the U.S. government to own 10% of what is it? What's the chip? Intel? Is it Intel? That's socialist. I mean, what the hell provoked him to do that? That's very interesting. But I think somebody just got in Trump's head one day, the last person came up with that. I mean, who knows? So they can move money in the U.S. offshore outside of the U.S. MAGA folk, listen up. They can move that money outside of your control while your broke ass can't. They move money offshore, finance globally, and don't rely solely on state contracts. See, they're getting your welfare tax money at the same time they use the military to preserve assets and defend assets abroad. They make money from that too. You don't, because you're too stupid to know what's going on. Just like you're too stupid to even vote for someone that wants you to have health care and education. That's not necessarily what's going on everywhere. Okay. German industrialists were tied tightly to the state because rearmament, autarky, what is that? I don't even know it. I got to look that up. And war created their profits. Okay, that's still bad. In other words, the American industrialists are like Hitler at home and active outside too. You know what I mean? In other words, they're not so tied to American oligarchs are not only the ones that support authoritarianism. They're not only tied to the U.S. Because they're the most powerful on earth. They're making money everywhere, which is why it's really strange that they're not a little more kinder to American citizens that pay those taxes, that protect, the military protects their businesses abroad, fights every day to protect those assets. It's kind of messed up that they don't stand on the side of the taxpayer a little more at home. But that's how some American people want it. They don't want them doing that. They don't want them standing by the American citizen at home. Accountability and law. In the U.S., while billionaires are enormously powerful, courts, media, and rival power blocks still challenge them. In Nazi Germany, once Hitler consolidated power, opposition was crushed and industry was locked into a state service. But we know Trump is actively trying to, secure those other assets, secure the other rich folk that don't support what he's doing. He's either threatening them or, making an example out of others publicly that don't bend the knee. Bottom line comparison. Yes, Hitler's finances and today's USA oligarchs play a comparable structural role as elite sponsors of political projects that protect their wealth and advance their interests. But the U.S. system still has institutional pluralism, rival billionaires with competing agendas, and some legal limits. Hitler's Germany had none, and those checks, once he consolidated power, right? So all the checks and balances were gone once he consolidated power. So Trump, this is just his second time at it. The first time we had all of those boundaries in place. People looked at Trump like, why are you trying to do this? The system didn't back it up. But the second time around, he's gotten a lot further than, at eroding the Constitution. I mean, these people are into trying to challenge everyone's citizenship through challenging the 14th Amendment. It's crazy. And other amendments, they're challenging women's rights to, it's like they're challenging just everybody. I mean, it's really crazy. But let's see here. In other words, the rhyme is there. Elite money fuels authoritarian leaning projects. But the song is different because today's U.S. oligarchs aren't bound to a single party state and still compete within the pluralist system. Let's see how long that goes. Now, I don't think it's going to, there's no guarantee that maintains itself, because right now, there's a large percent of Americans that don't respect that. They want it their way or the highway. If you're not for repressing women, they're willing to tell you get the fuck out of the country. If you're not for repressing minorities, they're willing to tell you to get the fuck out of the country, right? They have media and people talking who are populists in their MAGA movement, whose ancestors don't even go past a couple of generations. I mean, they're a sham and a scam on the people, And again, let me ask one last question before I go to the other thing I wanted to review here. Let's see here. Don't forget to like the video. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe, because it helps get through the algorithm. When I go from different systems, the algorithms don't go out exactly the same. So it affects how many people see the video instantly, and so make sure you're subscribed, no matter if you agree with me or not. I mean, hey, you're here. And if you want to continue to fight against what I'm saying or disagree, and you enjoy coming and saying, I fucking don't agree with you, then subscribe. It will help you do that. For those of you that do agree, or at least are interested in some of the things I'm saying, you think they're worthwhile, subscribing also helps you. So, but let me see here. What ethnicity was Hitler? Some people say he had Jewish or other background than Anglo. Let's see here. Anglo-Saxon. I should have wrote that because Anglos and Saxonians aren't even one people either. So let's see here. I mean, I'm only bringing this up because Trump is only a second, third. He's like a second or third generation immigrant himself, right? But he talks like he's been in the United States forever. He talks like his family died for something. He talks like he has more rights than other people that have been in the country longer or been on the land longer of America, which is really an insult to Native Americans. It's an insult to African Americans. It's an insult to European Americans who have been there for centuries. And you should take great offense. All those groups of people should take great offense, and some others. Okay. Adolf Hitler's ethnic background has been the subject of speculation for decades, especially because of the irony that he obsessed over racial purity. Here's what historians actually know. Documented ancestry, birth April 20th, 1889, and Brunel M.N. Damn, where's that? Okay, Austria, Hungary. Okay, damn, he's not even in Germany. Damn. What the hell? Okay, Austria, Germany. Austria and Hungary. Okay, ethnicity, Austrian German. His family were rural Catholics, part of the ethnic German population of Upper Austria. Okay, so they were ethnic Germans, but a part of that, living all the way over there in Austria. Okay, father Alois Hitler, illegitimate birth. Originally Alois Schicklgruber. Damn, what is this? Schicklgruber? Schicklgruber. Okay, later legitimized and changed to Hitler. What does that mean? What the illegitimate birth? Okay, okay, let me examine what that means more closely. Okay, Clara Polzel from a long line of Austrian peasants. I think that might be where the issue is. Let's find out what kind. His genealogy traced several generations, shows Catholic German speaking Austrian. Several generations ain't long. That's not long, bro. It sounds like a lot to some people, but several generations ain't centuries, yo. Okay, with no verified Jewish or Slavic ancestry. Okay, so damn, I'm curious about that one. A lot of people, a lot of the MAGA folk was like out here, they say this stuff. Hitler was part Jewish. Rumor claims come mainly from speculation about Hitler's paternal grandfather, Alois. Okay, Hitler's father is officially unknown. Some rumors, okay, so his dad's unknown. So he's a bastard, basically. That's what they would call it, you know what I'm saying? Some rumors said Alois' biological father might have been Jewish because Alois' mother, Maria Schicklgruber, worked as a servant in a Jewish household in Kratz. Okay? Serious historian reject this. Records show. Now, serious historian don't matter to no MAGA people. They don't give a damn if you're a serious historian or not. It's just, so I don't know if they agree with this or not. Records show Jews lived in Kratz at the time of Alois' conception, 1750s. Okay, no documentary evidence supports Jewish ancestry. The story circulated as Nazi enemies tried to highlight Hitler's hypocrisy, but it remains unproven and almost certainly false. Okay, well, it's not unproven that Trump is only a couple of generations American. I mean, he's an immigrant. He comes from an immigrant family, flat out. And that means only like second or third generation American. That's not the same as other people that were around in the Civil War and the War of Independence. That's starkingly different. That's a different American experience. Other ancestry theories, Slavic ancestry, some argue the name Hitler variants, Hitler has Czech roots since it's common in Bohemia. That's plausible. Many Austrian Germans had mixed German Slavic lineage, okay, but not unique or hidden. Anglo-Saxon claim Hitler had no English Anglo background. He was 100% Central European Austrian German. Okay, so modern testing. 2010, Belgian journalists claimed a DNA test of Hitler relatives suggests possible Jewish or North African Berber markers. Okay. However, this was not peer-reviewed research. Okay, population, but MAGA people don't care about peer-reviewed research. Population markers are very broad and don't prove direct ancestry. Historians largely dismissed it as unreliable. Okay, conclusion. Hitler was ethnic Austrian German with no verified Jewish or Anglo history. So he's not Anglo-Saxon. He's not Anglo. Is he Saxon? Okay, let me ask that question. Good question. Hitler is not Saxon in the ethnic or historical sense. So now we covered that. So he's not Anglo-Saxon. All right. So, I mean, a lot of this goddamn MAGA rhetoric, man, they go in deep. You know, they actually talk. They actually. Anyway, yeah. Now, next, let me just flip over to this. Right. The Holocaust. Okay. MAGA people don't think that. But here's something a lot of MAGA people do hold up. And I find that it does intersect in a lot of their rhetoric from time to time. And this is a book called The Protocols of Zion. And you have to understand, a lot of people read this book, not only MAGA folk, a lot of MAGA people quote this book and don't even realize they're quoting it, right? Because they try to justify the Holocaust. In a sense, they have to, because they talk about Jews in the United States of America. They went along with that whole thing. The Kabbalah, Jews controlling the world, controlling the U.S. banking system, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get it. But a lot of times, and unfortunately, a lot of Muslims, I hate to say this, quote this stuff and don't. I'm not saying all, and I don't even think most Muslims do, because, a lot of Muslims don't even read, can't even read the Quran. It's a cultural thing, not necessarily a intellectual belief, right? Not necessarily a book, strict book, rule book to it. You know what I mean? So just like a lot of other people are that way too. Culture doesn't always intersect with the actual books when people are practicing it, the rules, the harsh lines or whatever. But in any case, this is a book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Now, according to Wikipedia, but according to experts, this book originates in Russia, in the time of Russian czars. And before the Holocaust, before Hitler's rise to power, Hitler had read this book. He had read this book. And he got a lot of his ideas, it seemingly, from this book. Let's review it. And this is just a quick review. If you're interested, you should take the time to go over the information yourself. Don't trust me. Feel free to disagree with me, but also feel free to disagree with the source here and the sources within it. All right. Feel free to do that also, or not. Okay. Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a fabricated text purporting to detail a Jewish plot for global domination, largely plagiarized. I mean, the KKK, a lot of these MAGA people in the U.S., they've been reciting this kind of stuff forever because they're Christian extremists. So a lot of Muslim extremists and Christian extremists got a hold of this book and mocked themselves and part of themselves after this, part of their movement after this. For several earlier sources, it was first published in Imperial Russia. The Russian Empire was an empire, an imperialist state that spanned most of northern Eurasia from its establishment in November 1721. You know, colonials. They were a colonial endeavor, imperialistic endeavor, until the proclamation of Russian Republic in September 1917. So that's 2 centuries, clearly. That's a lot of generations of life, right? That might even be, you know, I don't even know how long Russia goes back before that. It's not that far back. I mean, not in terms of size. They were even smaller before this movement. You see what I mean? So, but in any case, in 1903 is when it was published in Russia, Tsarist Russia, right? Translation into multiple languages and disseminated internationally in the early part of the 20th century. That's 1900s or just before the 1900s, right? It played a key part of popularizing belief in an international Jewish conspiracy, right? Well, a lot of MAGA people come here and they like to type Jew. What about the Jew? You know, okay, let's review these things. The text was exposed as fraudulent by the British newspaper, The Times, in 1921, and by the German newspaper, Frankfurter Zeitung, right? In 1924, beginning in 1933, distillations of the work were assigned by German teachers as if they were factual, to be read by German school children throughout Nazi Germany. It remains widely available in numerous languages, in print and on the internet, and continues to be presented by anti-Semitic groups as a genuine document. It has been described as probably the most influential work of anti-Semitism ever written. Yes. I mean, I would have to agree with that. I've heard so many people that recite things and they don't even realize a lot of those things were recited in this book in Tsarist Russia, just flat out, you know. And I question that. Sometimes I just think like, damn, man, I used to think you was smart, you know. But this book is everywhere. I even found a copy. I even found a dude with a copy of this in Denmark, like straight up, you know. In Denmark, they don't burn books. Even if they don't agree with them, they keep them as part of the history so they can be reviewed. So the real history of Europe can be reviewed. These instances, these times, these existences, right? So people can come to a better understanding of where to go and not fall for the same old tricks, you know? But it's obvious the U.S. has not done that. They got people walking around here believing this stuff. The protocols, okay, let's go here. The protocols is a fabricated document purporting to be factual. Textual evidence shows that it could not have been produced prior to 1901. The document alludes to the assassinations of Umberto, right? Don't know how many people can see that. Right. Okay. And William McKinley. Okay, William McKinley, the Republican Party, a member of the Republican Party. I mean, yo, it's worth tying the, you know, just examining what it is of, you know. But it shouldn't surprise people, you know. It shouldn't surprise people at all. You know, this is the kind of shit that's going around. For example, as though these events were plotted out in advance, you know, conspiracy, right? The title of Sergei Nilis, okay, Russian religious writer, self-described mystic, mystic, huh? Widely distributed the first edition. I mean, note mystic. This is like a lot of MAGA folk. They into this stuff. Widely distributed first edition contains the dates 1902 to 1903. You know, he wasn't an educator. He was a mystic. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't a historian. He was a mystic. Going back to the soul of the MAGA minds. And it is likely that the document was actually written at this time in Russia. Cesare G. de Michelis argues that it was manufactured in the months after the Russian Zionist Congress in September 1902, and that it was originally a parody of Jewish idealism meant for internal circulation among anti-Semite until it was decided to clean it up and publish it as if it was real. Self-contradictions in various testimonies show that the individuals involved, including the text's initial publisher, Pavel Khrushchev, right, deliberately obscured the origins of the text, and lied about it in the decades afterwards. Political conspiracy background. Towards the end of the 18th century, following the partitions of Poland, right, the Russian Empire conquered the world's largest Jewish population. Yes, that was in Poland, y'all. The Jews lived in Schlitz, right, or Schlitzel, a Yiddish term for a small town. They lived in these types of communities. Yiddish term for small town in the predominantly Ashkenaz Jewish populations which existed. Now, keep in mind, this is not Sephardic Jews that they're talking about. Sephardic Jews have a different history, largely, right? So, totally, they expanded it in a different way throughout Europe prior to this, right? This is the 18th century. Sephardic Jews is more like 15th century expansion into Europe, right? In a different trajectory, you could say. Now, the Jews lived in west of the empire, in the Pale of Settlement, okay? And until the 1840s, local Jewish affairs were organized through the Kahal. Kahal, sometimes spelled Kahal, was a theoretic organizational structure in ancient Israelite society according to the Hebrew Bible, okay? Hold on. And then an Ashkenazi Jewish system of the self-governing. Okay, so they got it from the Bible, I guess you could say, right? Yeah, theocratic structure of ancient Israelite society, maybe, or not the Bible, but the Torah or something like that. But in any case, they've been practicing this, right? So the semi-autonomous Jewish local government, including for purposes of taxation and conscription into the Imperial Russian Army, right? So I hope y'all follow that, right? Now, following the ascension of liberalism in Europe, right? Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on the rights of an individual, liberty, consent of the governed, political equality, and the right to private property and equity before the law. A lot of MAGA people don't understand that because liberalism has been demonized so that you can steal the money. They've been using ignorant people. Following the ascent of liberalism in Europe, right? This is and among the intelligentsia in Russia, the Tsar's civil service became more hardline in the reactionary policies upholding Tsar Nicholas, right? The first slogan of orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality, whereby non-Orthodox and non-Russian subjects, including Jew, Catholics, and Protestants, for those of you that may be Jewish, Catholic, or Protestant, this might be interesting to you, were viewed as subversive fifth column who needed to be forcibly converted and assimilated. But even Jews like the composer Maximilian Steinberg, right, who attempted to assimilate by converting to Orthodoxy, were still regarded with suspicion and potential infiltrators supposedly trying to take over society, while Jews who remained attached to their traditional religion and culture were resented and as undesirable aliens. Okay. Resentment towards Jews for the aforementioned reasons existed in Russian society, but in the idea of a protocol's international Jewish conspiracy. So Hitler read this book. Hitler read this book. It's just very simple. Now, let me just go back to, you guys can look this up on your own. This is just a Wikipedia source, but they're quoting this. You can find this has been written about by many scholars, and this is just a collection of different people's writings. Let's go down. See, let's go down and see where the sources are. Here are the sources. You see, right? Structure and content, right? So you can read. There's plenty of reading for people out there that agree or disagree. I would caution either without reading first, right? because obviously there's a lot of entries here, which would probably be better than one person's opinion, right? Let's go on here. You can see there's a lot going on here. Look, there we go. Related or similar text, pertinent concepts, you see? So here we go. Even black folks have been using this as propaganda, some black people, so let's keep it real. You MAGA people that believe in this, guess what? There's some black folk that have been uttering the same silliness too, I mean, it is what it is, not that black is any particular thing but a color, but, a hair texture, it's not necessarily a sign of exactly your heritage, right? Not exactly. Heritage is more nuanced than that among all people. Okay, disinformation, hate speech. I mean, this stuff has been going around. I should even type. Here's some references here. Here you go. Yeah, there's loads. So there's a lot of reading to do before you agree or disagree, unless you're an expert. I'm not an expert myself, but I do recognize other people's works on the topic. So yeah. So I would take a look if I was you, whether you agree or disagree. But let me go back to this now. Let's see here. Did Hitler read the Protocols of Zion? Yes. Adolf Hitler was familiar with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and he used its themes through historians' debate whether he read it closely or simply exploited its propaganda. Okay, now let's see. Do Trump supporters whether they be appointees or people like the Proud Boys and other paramilitary groups in the USA use elements of the Protocols of Zion? I've never asked this question before. It's going to be interesting. Okay, let's see here. This is an important and sensitive question. The short answer is yes. Elements of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, though not always named directly, because people don't use the term often, and they don't. A lot of times people don't even know where these ideas originate, right? And that's education is not free in the U.S. Do appear in the rhetoric and conspiracy culture around parts of Trump's base. His appointees and militant groups like the Proud Boys are allied movements. They often resurface in coded, repackaged, or updated forms rather than open citation. The Protocols in modern America. The Protocols was Tsarist forgery. 1903 claimed Jews secretly plotted to control governments, finance, and media. Even though debunked in 1921, it still circulates in extremist and conspiratorial circles, often within attribution, right? Its core themes, Jews as puppet masters of finance, communism, immigration, and globalism, keep reappearing in U.S. far right. This, and this is part of the reason why a lot of the MAGA people, they don't support Israel. I'm not saying you should, right? Because a lot of leftists don't like Netanyahu, but they understand a few other dynamics going on, where there's different groups support and don't support for different reasons. It's not a unilateral agreement or disagreement. A lot of MAGA folk disagree with it just because of the Protocols of Zion. Not because of how they treat Palestinians, not because of how, not Jews, or Israelis, but Netanyahu and his military have been treating Palestinians. Not because of that. They hate Muslims too. They hate Palestinians also, which is weird how Palestinians could vote for Trump. I mean, Didn't you know these people hate you? Palestinian Americans, I mean, didn't you know these people hate you? Netanyahu, don't you know these people fucking hate you, dude? They hate your people, like flat out. Like, okay. Trump aligned circles, but they, not all do. Not all Jews are one people. They don't agree universally on everything. They have political disagreements, and they also have different histories. Not all Jewish people have the same histories, right? Trump aligned circles and echoes of protocols. A paramilitary group, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers. These groups rarely cite the protocols by name, but the rhetoric often overlaps with its conspiracies. Common narratives. Global elites are behind immigration waves. Leftist movements are secretly directed by financiers. America's decline is orchestrated by globalists. Yeah, globalists is taking the word of Jew because you can't just flat out say Jew now. These are rebranded versions of the protocol's idea of a worldwide Jewish conspiracy. Some members openly traffic. This is where Hitler is cool with this stuff. This is why Hitler supports it. He not Hitler, Putin. Putin knows from a distance what this is when he hears Proud Boys and Trump, and he already knows that stuff. He understands where it's coming from, and he supports it because he knows the origins of it are Tsarist Russia. He knows that. He knows that more than you MAGA folk and more than Trump. These are, hence, research. These are rebranded versions of protocols, ideals of worldwide Jewish conspiracy. Some members openly traffic an anti-Semitic meme that directly echo protocol-style imagery. Jewish figures controlling puppets or the globe. Trump appointee allies Steve Bannon and Breitbart popularized the term globalist. That's a new term. Globalist, a modern dog whistle often associated with anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists, because that's who they're really talking about. That is their conspiracy. They lean on the protocols of Zion, even though it's a forgery and had something to do with how Russia wanted to deal with several minority populations and political groups, not just Jews, and not just based on color. No. Politic. Some Trump-aligned politicians, Marjorie Taylor Greene, have invoked George Soros as the supposed mastermind of immigration. Black Lives Matter and democratic movements, essentially a protocol-style scapegoat. Yes. These narratives don't usually say Jews, but outright, but Soros or globalist bankers served as the stand-in. It's coded language. Globalist is coded language for Jewish, world conspiracy. Broader Trump supporters ecosystem, QAnon, far-right forums. QAnon itself is deeply indebted to the protocol-style thinking. A shadowy cabal controls governments, media, and finance. Classic protocols, motifs, secret elites, child exploitation. They're actually talking about themselves, which is crazy. You get it? Hence why the Epstein files ain't going to be released, because this is Trump that it's talking about in his protocols itself. I'm just saying, seriously, they do a lot of gaslighting. Classic protocol motifs, secret elites, child exploitation, world control, updated into the deep state and cabal language. QAnon and similar movements have directly cited or recycled protocols derived material, even if followers don't know the original source. Yeah, even if you don't know the original source. But you don't, again, education in America is not free. It's only for the rich and the people that want to pay debt for the rest of their life. Slavery, another form of economic slavery. You see how that works? But they're not against that, though. These MAGA people aren't against that, but they claim they are, but they're not. They're actually working for it. Hitler and the Nazi promoted the protocols explicitly as truth. Explicitly. In today's U.S. groups rarely referenced it directly. It's more absorbed into the DNA of the conspiracy culture. The coded language, globalist, Soros, cabal lets the idea circulate in mainstream political discourse without openly citing anti-Semitic text. Bottom line, elements of the protocols absolutely live on in Trump world conspiracies. The names have changed: globalist, deep state, Soros, international bankers, but the underlying pattern of blaming secret Jewish elite conspiracies is a continuation of the protocol's framework. Trump himself has flirted with this rhetoric, but it is especially visible in its militant supporters, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and the conspiracy ecosystem, QAnon, far-right media. Yes. Would you like me to make a side-by-side chart that shows protocol conspiracy claims in 1903 match up with modern Trumpist rhetoric 2020? Jews control. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Perfect. Yes. Well, here's your chart, guys, and then I'm out. Comparative chart: protocols of Zion versus modern Trumpist rhetoric, just so we can see. All right, let's see here. Protocols of Zion. All right. This is the protocol of Zion. Jews secretly control governments to undermine nations. This is the modern Trumpist far-right echoes. The deep state controls Washington. Unelected bureaucrats, judges, and intelligence agencies supposedly sabotage Trump. Okay. Protocols of Zion. Jews dominate finance and banks manipulating economy. Okay, Jews dominate finance and banks manipulating economies. Okay, Trumpsters, globalist bankers or Wall Street elites run by the system. Figures like George Soros are accused of funding immigration wave protests and Democrats. Okay, protocols of Zion. Jews control the press and spread lies and weaken society. Trumpists, fake news media is the enemy of the people, claims that CNN, New York Times, etc., are controlled by hostile elites. Although leftists are not really cool, leftists criticize corporate media, just all of it, all corporate media, because obviously all corporate media got Trump's tax breaks, while everybody else didn't get a damn thing. And you MAGA folk definitely also liberal states, liberals didn't even get any disaster relief, Okay, back to the protocols. Jews corrupt morals and society, alcohol, sex, culture. And this is so funny because Republicans are just all embroidered with goddamn, pedophilia just everywhere. Pedophilia in their Christian churches, Christian leaders, thanks to Heathsec. Epstein, Trump's best buddy for years, pedophile, huge ass pedophile, and Trump being accused of pedophilia also openly. The liberal elite cabal pushes woke culture, LGBTQ agendas, or grooming children to weaken traditional, so what they do is it seems like their pedophilia epidemic. What they do to hide that, to defend themselves from the pedophilia epidemic, which is one of dominating and committing crimes against your own, what they do to divert from those actions is to vilify LGBT people who are not pedophiles. Scapegoat. Okay. Protocols of Zion. Jews orchestrate revolutions. Communism, socialism, Antifa, and BLM are not grassroots. They're funded and directed by Soros globalists to destabilize America. You see? Protocols of Zion. Jews seek world domination through secret societies. Trumpsters. The cabal, New World Order wants one world government, echoed in QAnon, InfoWars, and paramilitary group rhetoric. Protocols of Zion. Protocols as proof of conspiracy despite being fake. QAnon drops. Okay, Trump supporters. QAnon drops and memes serve as modern pseudo documents that believers treat as hidden truth regardless of debunking. Takeaways. The protocols provided the template of scapegoating secret elites, finance media, and social decay blamed on Jews. Trumpist aligned movements recycle the same conspiracy skeleton but use updated labels: globalist, deep state, Soros, cabal. I mean, you know, it doesn't, any person who really reads up on history doesn't need to be reminded of this. You should know this already. I mean, come on, if you keep saying cabal, we know where it's going. I mean, you should know if you know what anti-Semitism is and its roots. Not saying that there's not other forms of discrimination, because there definitely are. And sometimes they're enjoined together, you know. This makes the idea palatable to a broader audience while keeping the old anti-Semitic logic alive in coded form. Yeah. So I'm out. I appreciate everybody for coming out. I couldn't really look at the chat this time because I needed to focus on doing some reading. That's what happens when I'm over on this system instead of the one I'm normally using on my mobile, you know. But I hope people got a little bit of information that you could chew off and think about and research yourself. Yeah, and you know, hopefully you can see, you know, it can help you see a little bit more what's going on right now in a broad way, you know, how the Constitution is being ripped apart, how these kind of fake ideas sit in the background, these conspiracy theories of these groups, you know, and so on and so on, you know. And I appreciate the listener who gave me the idea of going to the brown shirts and the black shirts. Now, I didn't go that deep into some particulars, but the next time I touch on the topic, I will go more deep just into them. But I think it's enough. If you notice by how many MAGA people are in the chat, I think I did a good job. You can kind of judge how good of a job I'm doing by how much they resent me, right? So, so on that note, you know, I appreciate everybody for coming out again. Please subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, and you know, and please like the video, share the video. There was somebody who was in the chat the other day that was mentioning to me about modding. Please send me an email. I believe the email is on the YouTube page, but let me just double check that real quick here. Let me see here. No, let me do that down here. YouTube. Let me see. YouTube V Media. Let me just make sure that's here. The proper email is on the no, this is V Media. Double E, man. Come on. YouTube V Media. There we go. Here we go. All right, let's take a look here. Let me just double check this before I say goodbye. Okay, more. Let's see here. Is it not on there? Email address. There we go. There's the email address. It's there on the about page, on the description page. So please send the email. Please don't send spam. But you know, I will look through, and I do have some good security on my email, so don't worry about it. But in that case, I'm out, y'all. We're gonna catch up soon, and I appreciate everyone for coming out. Peace. Peace. Be careful for what you wish.
They want war. Crime babies looking for food. Starvation, the recipe. People subdued. When the people you trust got it in for you. Deceit is the word of the day in every crew. Don't let it go. It's from the days of old. Time is up, but some still do not know. Can I make up my mind? Is it worth the dime? Do I have to take a minute just to make it mine? Life's never fair, but don't listen to the TV. Go out and take a listen to the streets. With the people in the slums and the homeless bums. With degrees and degrees sitting under a tree. It's not easy in the world for the poor man. The one that brought you to reality, see. They don't want you to know about the black sheep. Leaving 7 rows to the 12 families all around the globe with an ancient code. Is it really asking a lot to say a death old? Cause we sitting on the earth looking back at extinct. And I'm standing on some ground that's about to sink. I ain't scared for a minute, I ain't about to blink. But I documented for the world what I see and think. Feel we on the call and I feel we on the ground. break. All Congress gonna do is waste paper and ink. Vote or die. You voted and you'll die. You can have it both ways, can't say it's a lie. You can march all you want, but they playing you wrong. They only understand war, it's the same old song. They want war, all they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more. But they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war. War, all they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more. But they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war. Like the lotus coming out of the mud with colors, I create envy in those with power but jealous. I unify the poor with my song, the hell with the others. Descended the way they treat indigenous brothers. Cause I understand we link forever. They try to hate us even though that we keep it together. I'm not talking about controlling the air or the weather. I'm talking about maintaining the truth, the high endeavor. A rebel drops bombs in the midst of trouble. The free world counterattack and now there's double. But nature gets the shit in a way that's subtle. If you stop the machines for a minute you might hear. But they won't cause the TVs whisper in the ear. And capitalism has eyes that don't tear. And they cloud up and get crazy and won't steer. And like an ab, it's hard to get an ass to listen. Living like this is like living in prison. It's hard to keep hope when you're living in prison. The spiritual thoughts, so yes, the mental prison. The outside, yes, it's got to get through. Something's gotta die, so something here can live. Your life is nothing if you got nothing to give. Keeping the spiritual, yes, disguised as religion. Controlling your mind, the mental prison. They want war, all they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more. But they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war. War, all they really want is a war. Diversionary tactic to make the big score. The diamonds in the morning, you know they want more. But they wanna keep you low, so they manifest the war.
Ladies and gentlemen,
War. War.
Co-producer is
What does your video sound?